The demand the sky over Earth turned dark as something massive blocked the sun. People looked up in fear, pointing at the huge shadow stretching across the land. It was not a cloud, not a storm, but a warship. A ship so big it looked like a floating city. Its black and silver hull glowed with strange symbols, and its engines hummed like thunder. Inside Earth's main military command center, alarms screamed. Screens showed the alien flagship entering low orbit, its cannons locking. On 2 key cities, officers shouted over each other, trying to get updates from satellites and defense systems. The air smelled of sweat and tension. Then, every screen in the room changed. The image of a tall alien filled the displays. He was covered in golden armor, with ridges running over his head and piercing yellow eyes. His voice was deep and cold, each word heavy with power. "I am Grand Marshal Rozak of the Zarth Dominion," he said. "Your planet is now under our control. Surrender immediately or face total destruction." No one in the room spoke. The silence was so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked away. The alien's gaze seemed to pierce through the cameras, scanning every face. He expected fear, begging, maybe even tears. But then, at the far end of the table, Captain Riley Kane leaned back in his chair. He was young compared to the other commanders. His uniform crisp, but his expression calm. He tilted his head and smirked. "That's it?" he said casually. "That's your big speech." A few officers turned to stare at him. Riley's tone was not angry, not frightened. It was amused. It was as if Rozak had just offered him a bad cup of coffee instead of a death threat. Rozak's eyes narrowed. "Human, you misunderstand." The alien growled. "This is not a negotiation. This is your one and only warning." Riley chuckled, leaning forward. "You want surrender. You're gonna have to come down here and take it." The room froze. No one talked to an alien warlord like that. But Riley didn't care. He was not raised to bow to anyone. The silence broke when a single laugh escaped from another officer. Then another. Soon, a ripple of quiet laughter spread through the command center. Rozak tilted his head, clearly confused. He had invaded dozens of worlds before. On every planet, leaders begged for mercy. Armies dropped their weapons. But humans were laughing. Riley stood up, his boots echoing on the floor. He walked toward the main screen, hands in his pockets, his smile growing wider. "Let me tell you something, Marshal," he said. "Humans don't surrender. We fight, we bite, we bleed. But we never give up." Some officers nodded, others crossed their arms. Even the ones who had been afraid moments ago now stood straighter. The mood in the room had shifted. Fear was fading, replaced by something stronger. Rozak's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You will regret this," he said. The screens went black. The alien fleet began to move, shifting into attack. Formations. Riley turned to his team. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Let's make them regret coming here." In the background, the war room lit up with activity. Holographic maps of Earth and space flickered into place. Ships were being deployed. Defense grids powered up, and encrypted orders were sent to every human fleet outside. The alien flagship loomed like a mountain in the sky, its smaller escort. Ships formed a wall of metal and firepower. From orbit, they could destroy a city in seconds. But for some reason, they hadn't fired yet. In Rozak's command chamber, alien officers stood around a glowing tactical table. They whispered to each other in their own language. One of them said, "Marshal, the humans. They are strange. They should be afraid, but they are not." Another replied, "Fear will come after the first strike." Rozak said nothing. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. The human captain laughing at him. It made no sense. War was supposed to break an enemy's spirit before it began. But instead, his enemy had smiled back on Earth. Riley Kane adjusted his flight jacket and sipped from a mug of black coffee. He wasn't just waiting for war. He was ready for it. And deep down, he knew something Vrozak didn't. Humans had faced worse odds before. And they had a secret weapon that no alien could understand: their ability to laugh in the face of death. The first move belonged to the aliens, but Riley was already planning how to take the second, and the third, and maybe the last. The laughter. The alien fleet floated above Earth like a wall of steel and fire. Every satellite camera captured their size and power, sending the images across the world. Most people expected panic, chaos, and hopelessness. But instead, something else began to spread. It started in the war room. A few chuckles after Riley's daring words, then those chuckles turned into open laughter. And somehow, that laughter escaped the sealed command center and reached the outside world. News stations replayed the broadcast. Citizens saw Captain Riley Kane smirking at the alien general. They heard him refuse surrender without a hint of fear, and people in homes, shelters, and military bases began to smile. Some even laughed out loud. It wasn't foolish laughter. It was the kind that grows from defiance. On the alien flagship, Vrozak's officers did not understand. "They mock us," one said, his voice low and angry. "Mockery means weakness," another suggested. But Vrozak shook his head slowly. "No. Mockery is a weapon," he growled, "and humans are using it well." Meanwhile, in a dusty hangar on the edge of Earth's military zone, pilots prepared their fighters. They joked with each other as they strapped in. One said, "Think we'll get a shot at those big ships?" Another replied with a grin, "Only if they're dumb enough to get close." The fear that should have frozen their hearts was gone, burned away by the captain's fearless attitude in the war room. Riley walked among the officers. "Remember this," he said. "If they think we're scared, they'll crush us. But if they think we're crazy, they'll hesitate." He tapped the holographic map, pointing at several alien positions. "They expect a clean victory. We'll give them a dirty fight." Vrozak opened a new channel, broadcasting to every human frequency. "This is your final chance." His voice boomed. "Bow before the Dominion. Lay down your arms. Accept your place as our subjects." The reply came within seconds. Riley didn't even sit down. He stood in front of the camera, coffee mug in hand. "Do you want coffee with that surrender?" he asked with a straight face. Several officers behind him burst out laughing. The sound traveled through the alien comms like a wave. Even the alien technicians paused in disbelief. Vrozak's clawed hand tightened on the edge of the console. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Certainly not a species that should have been trembling. And yet, here they were, laughing in the face of annihilation. The strange thing was, the laughter started affecting the aliens too, not in a pleasant way, but in a way that made them uneasy. They began second-guessing their orders. If an enemy could laugh like this, maybe they knew something the Dominion didn't. On Earth, that was exactly the plan. Riley didn't want the aliens to see despair. He wanted them to see a species that treated war as just another challenge. Humans had been outnumbered before. Humans had faced extinction before. And yet, history had taught them that a fight isn't over until the last human falls. That night, the streets of major cities glowed with light despite the alien shadow overhead. Musicians played loud songs. Soldiers danced in armored courtyards. Old veterans told war stories to young recruits. Some of those stories were funny, some terrifying. But all ended with the same message. Humans endure. Vrozak called his council again. "We will strike their cities at dawn," he said. "Destroy their will before it spreads further." His officers nodded. But none could erase the image of the human captain smiling like the war was already won. In the command center, Riley leaned over the table, studying the alien fleet's movements. "They're getting ready," an aide whispered. "I know," Riley replied. "Good. Let's give them the warmest welcome they've ever had." He glanced at the officers and added, "And don't forget to smile when the sun rose." The alien ships began to shift into attack formation. The first battle was about to begin. But the humans were not silent over every frequency. Across every military channel, a single sound played, the sound of soldiers laughing. And somewhere deep in the alien flagship, for the first time in his career, Grand Marshal Vrozak felt a small and unfamiliar emotion, not anger, not pride, but doubt. First strike the dawn over Earth was red, not from the sunrise, but from the glow of alien war engines. Grand Marshal Vrozak's flagship moved into position, flanked by dozens of heavy assault ships. From orbit, they could wipe out entire cities. In seconds, the Zarth Dominion had done it before, to other worlds. And they believed Earth would be no different in the command center. Alarms screamed again, screens lit up with warnings. Enemy ships arming their main cannons. Officers looked at Captain Riley Kane. Waiting for his orders, he simply sipped his coffee and said, "Let them shoot first." When the first alien blasts came, they were like spears of blue fire cutting through the clouds. They struck their targets, or at least what the aliens thought were their targets. The alien fleet expected to see human cities erupt in flames instead. The explosions hit empty ground, fake structures, and holographic projections. Targets destroyed, an alien officer reported. But when the smoke cleared, the buildings were still standing. In fact, some weren't even real. They shimmered and glitched like broken images. Vrozak's eyes narrowed. "Explain," he demanded. A second alien officer stammered. "The humans? They moved their civilians. These cities. They're decoys." Vrozak slammed a clawed hand onto the console. This was not how wars with primitive worlds were supposed to go. On Earth, the real cities were dark and silent. Entire populations had been evacuated underground or into hidden shelters above them. Giant projectors cast realistic city images into the sky. Even the heat signatures were faked using industrial generators. The aliens had fired on nothing but air. Riley watched the alien attack fail and allowed himself a small smile. "Let's make it worse for them," he said, with a wave of his hand. Earth's defense network went active. Dozens of human satellites uncloaked from their stealth fields. Each one fired bursts of electromagnetic interference toward the alien ships. Alien targeting systems began to flicker. Cannons locked onto the wrong coordinates. Some ships accidentally aimed at their own escorts. One massive cruiser even fired on the flagship. Before realizing its mistake, Vrozak roared in fury, "Counter their interference. Destroy those satellites." But the moment alien ships turned their guns on the satellites, small human strike teams hidden in the debris fields made their move. These teams used tiny stealth craft, no bigger than civilian cars. They slipped through the chaos and latched onto the hulls of alien warships. Robotic arms drilled into the armor and planted small hacking devices. Once activated, the devices spread false data into the alien fleet's systems from his seat in the command center. Riley spoke into an open channel. "How's that surrender?" "Going, Marshal," he said, with a mocking tone. The transmission played across the alien bridge. Vrozak's officers exchanged uneasy glances. It was one thing to be mocked before a battle, but to be mocked during a battle, they were clearly losing control of. That was worse. On Earth's surface, resistance teams were not celebrating yet. They knew this was only the first exchange. The aliens still had overwhelming firepower. But every minute of delay was a victory. Every misfire bought humans more time to prepare. A squadron of alien fighters broke through the interference and dove toward the planet. They were fast, sleek, and heavily armed. But as they passed over a seemingly empty stretch of desert, dozens of hidden missile launchers rose from beneath the sand. The air exploded with fire as the fighters were blown apart mid-flight. Reports poured into Vrozak's war table. Missed shots, sabotaged weapons, destroyed squadrons. The humans were not acting like a desperate species. They were acting like hunters, and every alien ship was prey. Riley leaned against the edge of the table in the command center. "They're getting angry," he said quietly to his second-in-command. "That's good. Angry enemies make mistakes." Back in orbit, Rozak clenched his fists. His invasion was supposed to be swift and brutal. Now it was turning into something far more dangerous. A slow, frustrating war of tricks. And worst of all, the humans were still laughing, not just in their broadcasts, but in intercepted private channels. Every alien listening could hear them, confident, fearless, unbroken. For the first time, Rozak gave an order he had never spoken before. "Pull the fleet back. Regroup. We will crush them in one blow." But deep down, a seed of doubt had already been planted, and Riley Kane was planning to make it grow. The human counter the alien fleet drifted in high orbit, their massive engines glowing dimly as they regrouped. From a distance, they still looked unstoppable, but inside, Rozak's officers worked in chaos. Maps and readings flickered with errors. Weapons kept resetting, and some ships even reported false damage alarms. Rozak sat in his command chair, his golden armor reflecting the dim light. "This is not a defeat," he growled to his crew. "It is only the first step," but his voice lacked the same certainty it had before. On Earth, Captain Riley Kane wasn't wasting time. He knew the aliens would be back with a stronger push, so he decided to strike first. Not with brute force, humanity didn't have enough ships for that, but with precision. In a hidden hangar beneath the Rocky Mountains, engineers worked on strange, sleek pods. They weren't ordinary fighters. Each was designed to look like floating space debris, old satellites, broken panels, and twisted scraps of metal. But inside each scrap was a fully armed stealth craft. Riley stood before the pilots. "You'll be ghosts out there," he said. "They'll think you're junk until it's too late." The pilots grinned. This was the kind of mission humans were made for. At nightfall, dozens of these disguised crafts launched quietly into orbit. They drifted slowly, mixing into the natural debris fields that circled the planet. Alien sensors scanned them, but ignored them, just more useless. Human trash. Hours later, Riley gave the signal. One by one, the stealth crafts latched onto alien ships. Mechanical arms extended, drilling small holes into the hulls. Through those openings, tiny hacking devices were inserted. Once inside, the devices began feeding false orders to the alien systems on the alien flagship. Rozak's tactical table suddenly showed human fleets in impossible locations. One human fleet appeared right behind them. Another showed up above Mars. Both were illusions, but they forced Rozak to split his forces to respond. Riley watched from the command center as alien ships peeled away from the main formation. "Hook, line, and sinker," he muttered. Then came the second phase. The hacking devices began shutting down power grids at random. One alien battleship lost all engine control and started drifting toward a smaller escort vessel. They collided, sending a bright explosion across the darkness of space. In another sector, an alien destroyer's targeting system glitched and locked onto one of their own carriers before anyone could correct the error. A volley of plasma fire slammed into the carrier's side from Earth's surface. Civilians watching through telescopes could see the flashes of alien ships accidentally fighting each other. Rozak slammed his claws into the arm of his throne. "Find the source of this sabotage," he roared. But every system they checked came back clean. It was as if the humans were inside their ships, whispering into their computers, and in a way, they were, hidden aboard the stealth crafts. Human operatives in armored suits worked silently. They planted timed charges, copied alien navigation codes, and transmitted data back to Earth. None of them expected to return alive, but none hesitated. Riley opened the comm channel to Rozak again. The alien general's face appeared, his expression carved from stone. "How's your fleet holding up?" Riley asked with a mock smile. "You're going to die for this," Rozak snarled. Riley took a sip of his coffee and shrugged. "Maybe, but you'll get there first." Back on Earth, the mood was electric. Citizens followed every update. On giant screens in public squares, cheers erupted every time an alien ship went dark or exploded. Children painted Riley's face on walls with the words, "We don't surrender." But Riley knew this wasn't victory yet. The Zarth Dominion was far from beaten. This counterstrike had only hurt their pride, and that made them more dangerous. In the alien war room, Rozak ordered a desperate move. "Bring me the human captain alive," he commanded. "If they want to laugh in my face, let them do." Here, under my blade, Riley didn't hear the order. But somehow, he sensed it was coming, and instead of fear, he felt a strange excitement if Rozak wanted him. Then maybe it was time to let himself be caught, because deep in Riley's mind, the real trap hadn't even been sprung yet. The Capture the Alien fleet had stopped playing games. They spread out like a net, their warships moving in perfect formation. Rozak's voice thundered across every alien channel. "Bring me the human captain alive." It was no longer about conquest, it was personal. On Earth, Riley Kane stood in the war room. Eyes fixed on the holographic map, he watched the alien ships close in. "They're coming for you." His second-in-command said quietly. Riley nodded, a faint smile curling on his lips. "That's the plan," he replied. He stepped into his personal shuttle. It wasn't armed with much, just enough to make it look like he was trying to escape. As the shuttle lifted off and broke through the clouds, alien sensors locked onto it instantly, within minutes. 2 alien interceptors were on his tail. Riley dodged and weaved just enough to make the chase look real. Then, at the perfect moment, he let them catch him. A tractor beam wrapped around his shuttle like an invisible fist. The controls froze. Alarms blared. Through the cockpit window, Riley could see the enormous alien flagship looming ahead. It was like a floating fortress, every surface covered in heavy plating and glowing weapon arrays. Inside the flagship's hangar, alien soldiers stood in tight formation, weapons ready. When the tractor beam released the shuttle, it landed with a heavy thud. The ramp lowered, and Riley stepped out with his hands up. He wore no helmet, no visible weapons, just his uniform and that same calm smirk. The alien soldiers expected fear instead. They saw a man walking like he was the one in control. Some exchanged uneasy glances, their claws tightening on their rifles. Rozak was waiting for him at the end of the hangar. The alien general stood, taller than any soldier, his golden armor shining under the bright hangar lights. "You are Captain Riley Kane," Rozak said, his voice deep and cold. "That's me," Riley replied. "Nice ship. By the way, shame about how it's falling apart." The alien guards hissed at his tone, but Rozak raised a clawed hand to silence them. "You will answer for your defiance," the general said. "Oh, I'm answering," Riley said. "I just don't think you'll like the answers." 2 guards stepped forward and seized Riley's arms. They marched him through the massive corridors of the flagship. The walls were covered with alien symbols. Glowing with faint red light, the air smelled of metal, oil, and something faintly chemical. They brought him into a vast chamber. The Alien War Council room, a round table of black metal, dominated the center, surrounded by armored officers. In the middle, a massive tactical display showed the Dominion's fleet and Earth in bright detail. Rozak stepped closer, his yellow eyes locked on Riley's face. "You think you are clever, human," he said, "but you are here now. In my grasp, no tricks will save you." Riley tilted his head. "You sure about that?" he asked softly. At that exact moment, tiny lights flickered in the corners of the room. They were so small, most wouldn't notice unless they knew what to look for. They were signal beacons, placed there by human operatives who had snuck Aboard days earlier, the beacons were already transmitting live coordinates back to Earth, in the command center far below on the planet. Human technicians smiled as Rozak's flagship appeared in perfect detail on their screens. Every system, every weapon, every weak point exposed. Riley had walked straight into the lion's mouth. But he had also marked the lion for the kill. Rozak didn't know any of this yet. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You laughed at me. You humiliated me before my own army. I will enjoy watching your planet burn." Riley met his gaze without flinching. "Funny thing, Marshal," he said. "I'm here for the exact same reason the alien officers exchanged." Confused looks. Was the human captain insane? Or did he truly have a plan? Back on Earth, fleets were mobilizing. The counterstrike Riley had planned from the start was about to begin. And the most important target was the very ship he was standing in. Rozak circled the human captain like a predator. The alien war council watched in silence, to them. This was a rare spectacle, the most defiant human finally captured. But Riley Kane didn't act like a prisoner. He stood relaxed, his eyes scanning every wall. Every console, every shadow in the room, the small signal beacons hidden in the corners kept blinking. They were already feeding the flagship's location and schematics to Earth's forces. All Riley had to do was keep Rozak talking until the trap was ready. "You think your little jokes matter?" Rozak growled. "They will mean nothing when your planet burns." Riley smirked. "Strange thing about humans," he said. "We don't wait for the fire to reach us. We bring it to you." Before Rozak could reply, the lights in the War Council chamber flickered. A low hum filled the air. Like something deep inside the ship had shifted across the alien flagship. Engines powered down, doors locked. And gravity began to twist. Officers staggered as the floor tilted slightly under their feet. Rozak slammed his claw on the console. "Report," he barked. But instead of a clear answer, the screens around the chamber filled with static. Then, a human voice came over the ship-wide comms. It wasn't Riley's voice. It was the voice of a human operative already aboard. "Hey Zarth boys, you left the back door open." The voice said cheerfully, in orbit, the rest of the alien fleet saw their flagship suddenly drifting off formation. Its weapons went offline. Shield generators sputtered. Alien captains panicked, unsure if they should protect it or retreat. Back in the chamber, Riley shrugged. "Guess you should have checked the walls before inviting me over." Rozak roared and lunged at him, but Riley sidestepped. The alien guards moved to block the door, but Riley wasn't trying to escape. Not yet. Far below, Earth's orbital defense cannons came alive. Ships that had been hiding behind the planet's far side ignited their engines and moved into attack position. Every weapon they had was now locked onto Rozak's flagship. And thanks to the data from the beacons, they knew exactly where to hit. In the alien war room, more systems failed. Life support stuttered. Lights went dark for a heartbeat. Then emergency red lighting kicked in. Riley stepped closer to Rozak. "You want to know why we laugh?" he asked quietly. "It's because you think war is about power, but for us, it's about outsmarting you." Outside, the first volley hit. Precision railgun rounds slammed into the flagship's engine cores. Explosions rippled across the massive vessel, shaking the entire chamber. Alien officers were thrown from their seats. Rozak barely kept his footing, his eyes blazing with fury. "Return fire," he shouted, but the weapons crews screamed back over the comms. The main guns wouldn't respond. Every system was jammed, hacked, or physically sabotaged. And then the second wave came. Human strike ships, small and fast, darted between the larger alien warships. They targeted engines, communication arrays, and weapon turrets. Every hit made the flagship's death grip on the battle slip further. Riley, second in command back on Earth, spoke over his earpiece. "Captain, we've Got them in a vice, ready for extraction. Not yet, Riley replied, glancing at Rozak. I think our host still wants to talk. The alien general bared his teeth. You will not win, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This battle is already over, Riley replied. You just haven't fallen yet. More explosions shook the flagship. One wall of the war room cracked, hissing with escaping atmosphere until emergency shields sealed it. The alien council's faces were pale now. Their unstoppable fleet was bleeding in front of them. And it was one human who had led the knife to their throat. Rozak finally realized the truth. Riley had let himself be captured, not because he was reckless, but because the humans wanted him inside the flagship, and now? The Dominion's most powerful warship was the biggest target in the sky. On the planet below, people watching the battle live began to cheer. The sound of their voices carried over. News broadcasts filling the airwaves with human defiance. Even soldiers in the middle of combat felt the surge of morale. The laughter that started days ago was now louder than ever. Rozak's flagship was still holding together barely, but the next strike could end it completely. Riley leaned in close, so only the alien general could hear. Your move, Marshal. But I think we both know how this ends. The flagship groaned like a wounded beast. Every explosion outside shook its massive frame. Panels fell from the walls, sparks rained down, and alien officers shouted over one another in panic. The one-sprout command chamber now looked like the inside of a burning fortress. Rozak gripped the edge of the tactical table so hard his claws scraped deep grooves into the metal. The tactical display flickered between red warnings and static. Every part of him screamed to keep fighting, to crush the humans, no matter the cost. But his instincts, the instincts of a warrior who had fought 100 battles, told him something else. He was outplayed. Across from him, Captain Riley Kane stood unharmed. The human captain's uniform was dusted with ash, but his smile hadn't faded. That's a nice fleet you've got there, Riley said casually. Be a shame if you lost all of it in one day. Another violent tremor rolled through the ship. The alien officer at Rozak's side shouted, shields down to 14%. Hull breaches on decks 6, 8, and 10. Engine 3 is gone. The rest of the fleet was no better. Human strike teams had crippled their formations in every direction. Rozak saw fire where there should have been dominance. Riley took a step closer, his voice dropping to a calm but sharp tone. You've got two choices. Marshal, he said, you retreat now, save what's left of your fleet. Or you stay and watch your flagship burn around you. The alien general bared his teeth. Surrender is dishonor, he growled. Riley shook his head slowly. No, he said. Surrender is survival, and living to fight another day is better. Then dying in a blaze of pride, the words hit harder than any weapon for Rozak. War had always been about crushing enemies until nothing was left but humans. Humans seemed to think war was about making sure you were still standing at the end, and somehow, in that moment, he respected it. A voice crackled over the alien comms. Marshal, enemy forces are surrounding us. If we don't withdraw now, we will lose every ship. Another report followed instantly. Civilian channels across the planet are mocking us, broadcasting their laughter. That word again, laughter. The sound that had haunted this campaign since the first demand for surrender. It was no longer just Riley. The entire human race was laughing at the Great Zarth Dominion. Rozak stared at Riley for a long moment. The human captain didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. For all his victories in past wars, Rozak realized this was the first time an enemy had looked him in the eyes and refused to give him fear. It was infuriating and strangely admirable at last. The alien general raised a claw and gave the order no one on his side ever thought they'd hear. All ships withdraw. The war room went silent. Alien officers froze, some staring in disbelief, but the Command was repeated through every channel of the fleet. The great invasion force began to break formation. Engines igniting for retreat, one by one, the alien ships turned away from Earth. Limping back toward the dark, Riley let out a slow breath. "Good choice," he said. Rozak didn't reply. He simply watched the human captain as if memorizing. His face? "This is not over," the alien general said finally. Riley gave a small shrug. "It never is," within minutes. Human forces reclaimed orbit. The skies cleared as the last alien ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. On Earth, every city erupted in cheers. People poured into the streets, waving flags, hugging strangers, and replaying the moment the alien fleet turned away. News broadcasts carried the same image everywhere: Captain Riley Kane, standing in the alien war room, calm and unbroken. His defiance had become the face of victory, back on the ground. Riley walked out of the command center into the bright sunlight. He could still hear the laughter, not just from soldiers, but from ordinary people across the planet. It wasn't mocking now. It was relief. It was pride. It was the sound of a species that had faced the edge of extinction and refused to blink. In a distant part of the galaxy, Rozak sat in his private chamber aboard the retreating flagship. His pride was wounded, his fleet battered. But his mind was fixed on one thought: the human captain. He had fought many enemies, but none like this, and he knew deep down they would meet again. For now, though, humanity's message had been written into the stars when the alien general demanded their surrender. They gave him laughter instead, and that laughter would echo in the Dominion's halls for years to come.